What's up, everybody? Welcome to the State of Wild, episode 78, a regular YouTube video web series podcast thingy. My name is Meowth, and as usual, I'm joined by my two good friends and co-hosts, Roffle and Corbett. How are you guys doing tonight?
Yo, I'm doing all right. It's been a long week, waiting for the news of what was going to get nerfed. We touched on it a little bit last week, and finally getting a hold of that information. Now we're just waiting for the patch to go live. So it's I don't know. It's kind of that again that lame deck period where feels just really bad queuing into some of those decks that are about to be nerfed, but still grateful that we are getting some balance changes.
Yeah, it's been a very emotional past few days after finding out the news. I'm sure everyone here is as upset as I am, but we can mourn together here at the funeral of Sorcerer's Apprentice.
Yeah, emotional in different ways. You were very sad. I think I was ecstatic.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, come on, you're leaking the nerfs. We haven't gotten there yet. Come on.
No, Meowth. The nerfs got leaked much earlier than this.
That's true. But some people, might just be hearing about it all right, whatever. Anyways, we'll talk about it in 2 seconds here. Before we hop into it, we got to take care of our housekeeping stuff first. So, of course, if you guys enjoy the podcast, whether you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or you're watching on YouTube, if you guys enjoy the content, make sure you guys drop a like, comment, subscribe. Small thing, but it does actually support us a ton.
You can also support the podcast by becoming a patron over at patreon.com/state of wild and pick up some sweet perks in the process.
And of course, you can always come join the State of Wild Discord server to come check out all things Wild Hearthstone, talk with the community, and just talk about things in general. So come join the community at that place. Yeah, it's great.
All right, let's talk about these nerfs, right? You touched on Sorc. So this patch is coming on the 25th, so it's coming on Tuesday, the day after this podcast comes out. And we're getting more balance changes. We weren't certain that we were going to get some in the first place, but we are finally getting some. And kind of the big one that everybody's talking about, Sorc Apprentice. Her time finally came, man. Her time finally came. She's been turned into a 4-mana 3/2. Your spells cost 1 less. The most notable interaction here is that she no longer gets pulled off a Drekthar. And, the whole thing that she costs 2 more mana. So, Corb, all of the different types of mage decks, what happens to them?
They die, Meowth. They die. There's a lot of stuff that just kind of gets wiped. It's like the mage class basically just got Thanos snapped in an instant, and you're just kind of wiped out. Like basically half of the kind of things that mage could do. So mages kind of go through a bit of reshaping, a bit of rebuilding, because there are a lot of strategies right now, like I've been saying, that are just entirely dependent on Sorc. Like Ignite Mage can still do its combo, but do you actually want to be playing Ignite Mage, like on a possible 2-turn delay? Like, I think that's going to be very shaky. And, 8 PM Mage is straight up deleted. And so it's going to be definitely a bit of a rejigging for the class overall.
Yeah, I've been hearing some rumblings of people saying that Ignite Mage is here to stay despite this. With Ice Block, 2 turns is... It's still a lot. Like it's a lot to ask, but it's less to ask for a deck like Ignite Mage. The spell version's probably certainly gone because like Drekthar into Luna and Apprentice is a big part of that. But like the minion based version really only needs to play a single Apprentice, and you're just copying it with Molten Reflection. One of the downsides I see to it is that you do no longer have a reliable way to fetch the Apprentice, so you have to manually draw it, which also slows down the combo. So we're not just slowing down the combo by 2 mana or 2 turns because of the nerf, but we're also slowing it down as a result of not being able to Witchwood Piper your Apprentice anymore. So, I mean, that's like a double whammy. I don't personally see it. I could see it as like, I don't know, a deck that exists and just like chops down the top end, but like that window that we've been talking about basically since United and Stormwind came out opened up a little bit as a result of this nerf, and I think that's generally a good thing. And as we'll talk about later, like the Ignite Mage was overperforming as a deck, and even if it still exists, it could certainly stand to be chopped down quite a bit.
Yeah, I will say the Ignite Spell Mage is the version that a lot of the people that are suspected of cheating are using is gone, right? So this Sorc nerf hypothetically takes care of the cheating situation at High Legend Ladder. I might be wrong about that, but that's kind of the general consensus I've been hearing about that. Corb's baby, APM Mage, is dead because of this. I think Ignite Mage, I'm in the boat of Ignite Mage. I think is still an okay deck, and I think it's going to be a deck that might still have a place in the metagame, because even if it's no longer consistently killing on turn 5, turn 6, and you're saying it's going to be two turns slower, comboing on turn 8, let's go 3 turns. Let's say turn 8 consistent combo, it's still extremely fast for a deck that has 2 ice blocks.
I disagree, I think. The reason I disagree is that like turn 6 or turn 8 is like a full combo can be okay if you're something like Raza Priest, right? Like if it was actually consistently killing on turn 5, or like Shadowwalk as an endgame was turn 8. I think I said turn 5, but turn 8. That's fine as long as you're doing stuff. Ignite Mage spends its early mana doing literally nothing. Like it tradables and tradables and tradables and plays blocks. And I think that like a 2-turn window, it's not probably going to be at exactly 2 turns, because you get 2 additional draws, right? So let's say the average combo was like 6.5, 7. Now it blows out to like 8, 8.5. It's still a really, really big deal. Not just because the aggro decks are going to chomp down on it now so hard. Like, can you imagine how good Shadow Priest is going to be into Ignite Mage now that it can't ever combo on like turn 6, basically? But it also gives a lot of time to things like Shaman. You know, it gives them a couple extra turns to either disrupt it with Rad or to play another Lothab, or they don't have to play the Lothab on turn 5 anymore. You know, there's so much more time to just kind of sit back, develop your own game plan, and be disruptive. And I think it loses so much ground in those kind of matchups. And, you know, there have been Mage decks around that have had Ice Block and could, quote unquote, like combo off on turn 7 and 8. And they're pretty shitty. Like, they're not great right now, like things like Mazaki and stuff. So I'm very, very skeptical about the idea of Ignite Mage still being a viable deck. And I think the 2 turns, or slightly less than that, is too much of an ask.
I think it'll take a bit more, a bigger shift than in the metagame than, you know, maybe these nerfs are bringing along to see Ignite be a competitor right now, just because of the speed of the remainder of the decks isn't going to be friendly to a deck like Ignite Mage. Like, things really need to open up quite a bit more to give it that time that it needs, that it now needs, in order to combo a little bit later.
Yeah, I guess I the reason that I am so skeptical is because we've said this in the past of, oh, this is like gonna kill the deck, right? This nerf is so huge, and then the deck remains around, like Darkleer Warlock. I think we said that like how many times about Darkleer and Flesh Giants and stuff like that. It's like, until I see it, I'm hesitant to believe it. But, you know, I mean, I hope that it's dead. Like, I absolutely despise the, like you mentioned, they just sit there and do nothing, and then they just kill you on turn 5, turn 6. So like, if the deck is dead, like gone, I am totally okay with that.
I think it'll almost completely disappear from ladder, at least in the first few weeks, and unless things go like super greedy following that, like I don't see it coming back for a period of time, at least until we see like a greater shakeup of some of the other decks in the format.
Yeah, for sure. All right, let's go through all these other nerfs and buffs. Let me just touch on all these standard buffs that we skipped really, really quickly, and then we'll come back to some of the wild nerfs. Just that we can say that we mentioned them. So, Scabs, the Rogue Hero card, going from 7 to 8. Not really seeing a ton of playing wild, so it doesn't really matter. Wildpod Knoll going from a 5-mana 4/5 to a 6-mana 3/5. So this is the card that got discounted when you added cards to your hand from another class. Rogue Standard has its own issues. We were talking about WoW balance. Rogue was, holy crap, I think 45% in Standard.
Over 50. Over 50 at top 1k Legend as Rogue.
That's gross.
So, yeah.
So that's why you're seeing these 2 cards hit. Cloak of Shadows, I think, is like the last of those standard Rogue hits that might be the only one that's really affecting a deck in Wild. So Cloak of Shadows going from 3 to 4. So Pillager Rogue was like the only mainstream, I say that, but it was the only deck that was really running this. And the 5 people that are playing Pillager Rogue are really sad now because their deck gets worse. But I know, I mean, Pillager Rogue getting worse, I think I'm very okay with, because it's very similar to Ignite Mage, where they don't do anything and then they just kill you on turn 6, turn 7. So am I missing anything with these 3 Rogue nerfs? when it comes to
No,
wild.
I mean both Cloak and Scabs were being put to use in Milrogue, which was popping up a little bit. Like that's not ever going to be a super competitive deck. So yeah, I think Pillager is the biggest hit, but I think it actually ends up hurting Milrogue quite a bit more. An extra a turn later on Scabs is already kind of a bummer, but like the Cloak really I think hurts both of those decks quite a bit, just because like you want to be able to squeeze other stuff in during your turn when you Cloak of Shadows, and now it's going to be much harder to do so. But at the same time, between Cloak of Shadows and Evasion, like it kind of felt like you were playing a similar game as you would against a free Shaman, where you just like you don't get to play for a few turns and then you lose. And I don't know, those feel bad. I think, and similarly, Ice Block and Ignite Mage feels pretty bad. So um, I don't know, not huge. You're not gonna find huge complaints from me about that, even though I do like to queue up Milrogue from time to time. I don't think like I think it's probably okay to keep that deck in check, just because it's not the not the most fun play experience for the opponent. And then finally, just like Wild Paw Nil was getting shoved into cute Rogue a little bit, and people have had some reasonable success with that, but probably just going to be too slow now. That both in terms of the stat loss and the mana cost, like that's a big hit for a card.
All right, and then the last standard nerf here, Incanter Slow. If APM Mage and Spell Ignite Mage weren't dead enough, this was like the nail in the coffin. In addition to the Sorc nerf, Flow getting hit again from 3 to 4. You're not playing spell based mage decks right now in Wild until we see cards rotate and potentially get unnerfed, or we see new cards, because 4 mana Flow, 4 mana Apprentice. I'm sorry, Corb. I didn't mean for this to happen as well, but I'm not too mad either. So
I knew this was coming. I knew this was happening. Like flow was something that kind of had to happen for standard, because Mizaki Mage was looking like a real problem. I mean, you're not meant to do like turn 6 OTKs in standard. That's our format. But they were doing it over in standard, and it was becoming a balance concern. If they touch Poison Rogue, then Mizaki was kind of just going to be a little bit without counter. So it made sense. But yeah, I don't think they're going to be reverting this one. I know we just talked about a whole bunch of reverts like last couple episodes, but I don't think they're going to be touching flow when it rotates. Yeah.
We already knew there's no world it was going back to 2, but now like
Yeah.
does it even go back to 3? Like maybe it does
so.
since Apprentice is gone, but like I could see a world when it goes back to 3. Like without Apprentice, is it really that big of a deal? Maybe in the future, but like you're just kind of playing the same. You're playing with fire the same way that we have been with Sorcerer's Apprentice for years. So maybe it does just stay at 4.
Yeah. Okay, let's wrap back around here to Wild. The last 2 changes that we're going to talk about are going to affect Wild decks. I was about to say Wild specific, and then I forgot that Pirate Warrior is still a thing in Standard. So in addition to Sorc Apprentice going from 2 to 4, the other huge change was to Rapid Fire. Rapid Fire was the best card in Odd Quest Hunter by a million miles, right? It was 1 card, complete the stage of your quest. Post quest completion, it was 1,000,000 damage. The card was absolutely insane. It got nerfed from 1 mana Twin Spell, deal 1 damage, to 2 mana Twin Spell, deal 2. So now it will be a 2 mana deal 2 that gives you a 2 mana deal 2. It's going to slow down your quest progression a ton because it's no longer odd, right? And so now you no longer have this card in your deck. That is 4 quest progression ticks now missing from the deck that only had 25 cards to begin with. Man, Odd Hunter getting a big hit here. Can it withstand Rapid Fire nerf from 1 to 2?
I mean, sure, like it's still a deck that like is good, but it legitimately lost its best card. Like, aside from maybe I guess you could make an argument for the quest line, but I think you hit on something really important about the nerf. That's more than just like, yes, it lost its best card. It's already carrying 5 bad cards minimum in the deck. Now it's got to find a way to carry 2 more. Like you're running a 23 card deck at this point, and so. Like, not only do you have low card quality, but it actually is getting to the point where it becomes very difficult to complete your quest in not even just like a timely manner, but in a reasonable manner to be competitive with the rest of the format. So it's just like you're almost turning into Pillager Rogue and Ignite Mage at this point, where it's just like, what are you doing in the early turns? And that was one of the deck's strengths, is that what it was doing is picking off apart your board until it could start shooting damage at your face. So like it's more than just the loss of rapid fire. It's the fact that like it was again already carrying bad cards, and I don't know that it can support any more bad cards in the deck. So unless they start printing more 1-mana damage spells, which to be fair is inevitable, it's Hunter. Like we'll get something similar to like a Wound Prey or On the Hunt eventually again, and but like that was going to happen anyway, so it's good that rapid fire is gone in a world where those spells do get released. So I see a lot of people, again, just like with Ignite Mage, moving away from Odd Hunter, and like I think it's probably less likely to come back, and people might shift over to the non-odd version. But like, I don't know, that feels like, because of the limited damage it's doing per hero power, it just feels like you have all the time in the world to get to them. So I don't know if that deck can work.
Yeah, replacing 4 quest ticks with 0 is kind of a lot. And yeah, I'm not actually 100% sure overall on how Auto Hunt is going to be pulling up. Like, I can see it becoming this tier 4, like, unplayable. Like, it just cannot complete the quest fast enough. Like, it's not good enough. But I think, like, the more realistic world is it's still pretty solid. I don't think people are going to play it. Like, I think people are going to abandon it, as they typically do when, you know, cards get nerfed, decks get nerfed. People usually ditch them, especially when they become much worse than what they used to be. And so I think Odd Hunter is going to be going away for a bit. There will be people forced, players are going to be probably forced into exploring the non-odd version. But I don't know, there's still going to be like a lot of play pattern of like double 1-cost spell on turn 2, and then all of a sudden you have a 2-mana deal 3 to an enemy minion, which is still like incredibly strong in the early game. But I don't know if it'll matter very much, because like I said, I don't think people are going to be very excited to play it.
Yeah, I mean, it'll still do Odd Hunter things too, right? Even without the rapid fire. Like if you're playing Even Lock or something like that, and you like take 10 damage by hero powering in the early game, then you're like, with the toxic reinforcements and aim shots and your hero power, like sometimes you could just Odd Hunter some people without even really needing the rapid fire. So like I don't think it completely falls out, because I don't know, we're losing, it's gonna sound weird, but we're kind of losing some of the hyper aggressive decks, right? When you look at Odd Hunter, but like you have Shadow Priest and Pirate Warriors getting a little bit worse, but I don't know, maybe Odd Hunter was suppressing some of those kind of aggressive decks that we might see come back into the meta now that it's a lot worse.
I don't know about that. I think that like the deck was performing really well, and in part that was due, I think, to the popularity of Pirate Warrior in the matchup there. Like you mentioned, just Odd Huntering people, like even Warlock in particular, which I could see making a resurgence, but like at that point, what's the quest doing in your deck? You know, like you really are like having a bit of a hurdle in terms of like actually having enough cards to complete the quest in the deck, unless you're just doing the Ignite Mage thing and just spending your mana throwing tradable minions back into your deck for a bit so that you can find the spells that you do need. Like I don't know, what are you doing in the early game, I guess is my question, because that's pretty mana intensive for a deck that, you know, if it's not actually hero powering down opposing minions, is going to, you know, be overrun.
I don't know, I've died turn 5, turn 6s to these Odd Hunters that have not drawn rapid fire. Like I'm sure they'll still be able to do that without rapid fire moving forward. It'll be a hell of a lot less consistent.
Yeah.
Right? And you might be...
I guess my other concern is that, like, Pirate Warrior already does a very good job of keeping board-based aggro in check. So, like, is that going to see a resurgence just because Odd Hunter's gone? I don't know. Like, I was looking at the matchup spreads for the current Pirate Warrior on the VS report, which I'm sure we'll get to, and it's still not looking good.
Do you guys think Ignite Mage or Odd Hunter is going to be better post nerfs? Because You guys seemed a little bit higher, at least on Ignite Mage, than I was. So
I think Odd Hunter will still be a good deck, and by good deck I mean like you could probably still hit Legend with Odd Hunter.
I think both. I mean, I think both decks will be at a place where you could probably hit Legend with it. I don't think that's necessarily terribly descriptive for the deck. I think they'll probably get. I mean, I don't want to get too much into it, but they're at a pretty similar place right now. I think they'll probably get knocked down a pretty similar amount to be at about the same like level, maybe a tier 3, where they're viable decks, but like their play rate's going to drop and they're not going to, be the meta defining decks in the format any longer, or at least not two of them.
I mean, I also just think that like Odd Hunter is going to get caught less in the crossfire of all the people trying to target Ignite Mage and APM Mage, because people absolutely hated those decks, so they teched really, really hard for them. So like without all the cult neophytes and the watch posts running around, I feel like Hunter.
Oh my!
Like,
oh yeah! Oh, you think people are gonna take out cult neophytes? People are gonna play cult neophytes? Come on!
I think you underestimate how much people hate Odd Hunter. Like,
well, okay, people might assume that the deck gets less powerful, and so they'll take out all their tech. And then I still think that Odd Hunter is gonna be like a very passable deck. Like I know I said tier 3 you can hit Legend with it. I guess that was completely arbitrary, but like I do think that Odd Hunter will be a better deck than Ignite Mage, because it still does stuff in the early game. It is not just, hey, I have to AFK for 2 more turns and then do my combo. Like the deck actually does things. It'll just be a little bit slower at doing the OTK damage that it had, and it'll still, like, if you have a hand of Aim Shot, Wound Prey, and then you're able to, like Corb said, 2 mana deal 3. Like that's still so freaking powerful. And I'm a believer in Odd Hunter still. I know we talked about these are 2 big changes, but I'm over here saying like I won't believe that they're gone until I see that they're gone. Like I do think that there's still going to be playable decks, both Odd Hunter and Ignite Mage.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that, but like, they are certainly going to get knocked down quite a few rungs, which probably a good thing.
All right, Gorb, what do you think? Odd Hunter or Ignite Mage? Which better?
I think Odd Hunter is clearly going to be better, personally. Yeah. Like, I think Ignite Mage is kind of a little bit done and dusted. I don't know. We'll see, though. We'll see. And whereas I think Odd Hunter will still maintain like a pretty solid spread into like a lot of the board-based aggro and things like that. It's still such a strong hero power, even if the quest completion is a bit slower. It still wins enough games, like without the rapid fires. So yeah.
Are you sure this isn't just a little bit of your mage bias? Of I hate Ignite Mage so much that like it's totally dead, right? Totally dead. There's no way it could be real.
We'll get into it, but I think a lot of matchups that are currently very close get destroyed by like a quest completion, by the OTK being like 1.5 turns slower. But we'll get into some of that later, I think.
All right. Let's talk about our last nerf here. Pirate Warrior. So Pirate Warrior was like the last of the big 3. It was not left out when it came to nerfs. The nerf was a lot lighter than the Rapid Fire and Sorcerer Apprentice nerf, because this was targeted at standard, and so they didn't want to completely kill the quest line in standard. So what they've done is the second portion of the quest here. So you previously had to play 2 pirates to get the 2 cannon shots. You now have to play 3 pirates. So this looks like a very small change, and it is, I guess, when you compare it to the Sorc and the Rapid Fire change, it is a very small change. But what this does is it does slow down your Okara by a turn. I think it's fairly safe to say. Like, I think if you are on the play, you are getting down Okara on turn 6 at the earliest, most likely 7. And if you're on the coin, maybe you're able to coin out the Okara on 6. So this, I think, does slow down Pirate Warrior by a turn. When you compare that to the Odd Hunter and the Ignite Mage quest, it seems very light. And I think a lot of people share that sentiment. At least just kind of in the broader community. I'm interested in what you guys think about Pirate Warrior's future moving forward.
So this nerf reminds me a little bit of the Quest Mage nerf, which went from 8 spells to 10 spells, and everybody...
6 to 8.
Sorry. 6 to 8? Well, So fine. It shows how much I know. Anyway, it added 2 spells to it, and everybody lost their mind saying, you know, what a pointless and useless nerf it was. It's not going to change anything, and then the deck died off. That said, Pirate Warrior is not Quest Mage, and I don't think I've ever been disappointed in a nerf this much, other than maybe when Aviana was touched instead of Juicy Psychmelon. But this one in a different way. Yes, it's going to impact the deck, but the deck is just like so far ahead of many other decks in the format, especially when we just see the direct competition for for the deck and for that top spot get nerfed pretty heavily, and then to see this, like, I feel like, I don't know, like it's disappointing to look at a sea of green in this deck's matchup spread and see like half a turn to a turn speed reduction as the answer to it, because it's like this very clearly, like, I'm happy to see wild nerfs in terms of Apprentice and Rapid Fire, but this very clearly wasn't a wild nerf for a deck that, like, just like Odd Hunter probably needs a wild nerf. Like, if you're making an argument that like Odd Hunter should be hit in wild, I think that same argument applies, and perhaps even more so, to Pirate Warrior. So there needed to be more done in my mind to this deck than just add 1 pirate in a deck that runs like 26, 28 pirates in it, right? So yes, it's going to slow it down, but like the deck needed a lot of slowing, and like it still has the core problem of the deck from my point of view, because, you know, like initially when it was released, I was like, well, Odd Hunter's getting nerfed, so maybe, and APM Mage are getting nerfed, so maybe some like slower decks can come back into rotation in order to deal with Pirate Warrior. Then I started looking at the matchup spreads. Reno Warlock, Reno Mage, Reno Priest all have horrendous matchups into Pirate Warrior because the deck has inevitability. And like an aggro deck should not have inevitability. I've been saying this for a very long time, and that's like the core problem with the deck, is that not only does it have an incredibly explosive start, but then like without losing a stride, just goes straight into Battlegrounds game mode, where it just like auto plays minions, damage, and weapons every turn, and you can just go AFK for the rest of it, and like it doesn't matter how much the opponent removes your stuff, because like the Juggernaut's playing the game for you. So like the core problem of the deck still exists, and yeah, maybe it happens a turn slower, but that's still, that's still faster than a Raza kill. That's still faster than a Pocket Galaxy into like Cloud Prince kill. That's still creating insurmountable threats that like even a Gul'dan can't keep up with, and unless you're able to like spike a good draw with Reno Warlock. So yeah, and I have a lot of personal disdain for this deck, obviously. So like I understand that I'm being biased like that, and by that in the same way that, yeah, it was easy for me to be take the reasonable side of things and say, hey, wait and see with the Quest Mage nerf. But like a lot of people had the same visceral reaction to that. So like I brought up Quest Mage to show the contrast, and I can't get away from like, I just don't think this is enough. And
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think even with the Quest Mage nerf, I remember that strong reaction that people had, saying it wasn't enough. I actually think this nerf is almost like lighter than the Quest Mage nerf, funnily enough. I think this is such a light touch, and I'm kind of a little bit surprised they even went for it in the end. But I guess they were just worried that with Rogue getting nerfed, everyone was going to flood back to Warrior anyway. But yeah, this wasn't aimed at Wild, and you can obviously tell because they kind of left this very untouched. I'm very much in the same camp as Roffle in terms of thinking that it does very little. I don't know about... I guess like in general, with the Ignite and Odd Hunter changes, I would expect Pirate Warrior to remain one of the best decks in the format. I expect it to remain tier 1. I think there's other decks in the format that are probably going to be just as big, if not as much of a problem. But yeah, this is super, super light. I think on average, like thinking about the nerf in terms of how much it slows it down, It doesn't really slow it down by that much. Obviously, you guys are identifying like half a turn to a turn because there are lots of times where you float the mana on the Rakara, but like you wouldn't have floated the mana if you actually needed to play that extra pirate out, right? Like if you have 3 mana, if you have like 5 mana left and you can't play Rakara, you can still go like 2 drop, 3 drop to get that extra pirate in. So in that case, it doesn't actually slow it down by anything. And there are going to be a lot of situations like that. So I think this wasn't targeted at Wild. I think it shows, and I think Pirate Warrior is still going to be one of the best decks in the format. And you know, for a lot of people, obviously Roffle included, it kind of sucks. Like, it's kind of bullshit. Like, Pirate Warrior is kind of insane right now, especially outside the confines of, like, top 100, top 200 Legend, where people just don't play it as much. But for the vast, vast majority of the players, yeah, it's going to be an issue, and I think it's going to continue to be an issue.
Yeah. I remember I have flashbacks to when, like, Demon Seed initially got banned, and I was like, I am surprised they're not touching the Pirate Quest here, because this Pirate Quest it's insane. And I remember this discussion, and you guys were not completely on board. So I'm glad we're all on the same page now, finally, 6 months later. But
yeah, we caught up.
Yeah, finally. No, I mean, in all seriousness, I totally agree with you guys. Even though it is half a turn slower, that doesn't make... Like, half a turn doesn't mean anything against all of the slow decks that you guys are mentioning. Any deck that isn't trying to end the game on 7 or 8, like it doesn't matter. And so, like, you still have infinite value, you still have infinite damage in your hyper aggressive deck that is extremely powerful at controlling the board. I will say the one thing that it's going to do is that it's going to make matchups in the mirror and aggro druid or aggro priest a little bit weird, because that cannon shot, like the tempo that you gain from those cannon shots is going to come out a little bit slower, and so like it will hurt your matchups sometimes against those other aggressive decks. But you're also playing Pirate Warrior and you have Ship's Cannon and Defias Cannoneers. Like, I'm not sure how much it hurts those matchups.
Right.
I would not be surprised if by the mini set they don't come back and take another look at this, if it does end up being super... Like, I feel like right now Pirate Warrior has the same symptoms in Wild that it does in Standard, where it is an extremely popular deck outside of Legend and even like at the lower ranks of Legend, but and not because like the skill cap or like anything like that, like it is in Standard, but it does drop off drastically at higher Legend and Wild.
I don't think it does. I know that's like a rumor.
I mean, in play rate, not in power level.
Oh, in play rate, in terms of strength, right? But like that's where I think it differentiates, because like I know in Standard it drops off heavily in terms of power level. I still think it's one of the best decks. Like you can play in high Legend, people just don't favor it as much because of the type of gameplay that it is. Like I think like it's still just it's a much more busted deck than the version in Standard right now. And yeah, like you're identifying the aggro druid and shadow priest matchups and things like that, but I really don't think the cannon shots matter that much in them being delayed. Like I think that those matchups are going to typically come down much more around like first mate cannon, like those early turns and whoever swings the board the fastest, and it can be a little bit less about those mid stage procs. Obviously they will matter sometimes, but I really don't think it's going to like suddenly make it unfavored shadow priest, for example. Like I think it's going to be a fine matchup.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I mean, that is more likely, I think, to matter in those matchups than in those particular matchups, at least, like in the aggro mirrors or board-based mirrors, than like Rakara coming down a turn slower, just because you are playing so aggressively for the board there, and so I definitely could see it mattering in certain instances, the cannon shots. But like with the Rakara, we talked about, yeah, it's half a turn. What's the big deal? But it's not just that it's half a turn. It's like half a turn, then the deck's still doing stuff. Like it's not going to stop playing cards just because it like, has to play an extra pirate. Like the deck has so much gas in the form of the Ankar that it draws, the Harbor Scamps now, and like it's not the Sky Raiders. Like it's not running out of steam just because it like drops Rakara half a turn slower. It's still going, and it's just like Rakara is mostly there for either finishing blows or those late game matchups anyway. So like it feels like a very light touch, but I would be happy if in a week or two we're looking back on how dumb and how much I overreacted to this. But it's hard to have that foresight right now. It just kind of feels bad. And I'm not as maybe optimistic as Meowth that they would revisit this. I think that this is just the card now. And,
Yeah, I think if they're not touching it now, then what could possibly happen to make them actually want to touch it?
Hey,
You know? We're at the point.
It paid off to have hope earlier this month when I thought that they were going to finally make wild changes.
That was a joke, Meowth. Don't claim that. That was sarcasm.
You don't get to claim that.
Nope, it was totally hope, and it paid off, and I'm just going to have hope and faith again. Yeah. All right, okay. Outside of maybe our disdain for Pirate Warrior and the lack of nerfs there, how are you feeling about the other two nerfs, kind of big picture, to just Mage combo decks and Odd Hunter? Were the nerfs good enough? Did you like what they did?
Yeah, I mean, there are things that maybe I would have preferred for the Apprentice. I think Corb had a good idea with like the battle cry as an option, so that like you can't copy it, you can't really abuse it off a Drekthar, that kind of thing. But like this is one of the nerfs that the community was pretty high on. I know like Martian had a good thread early before the nerfs even were discussed about why like 4 mana for Apprentice is a good option. So I'd encourage people to maybe check that out when they get a chance. But essentially, it still gives you the opportunity to do like Antonidas Exodia combos with Potion of Illusion. So like that nostalgia aspect of the card is still there without some of the more toxic early game combos that are possible with it. So I think I'm fine with a Rapid Fire. Again, certainly the most problematic card in the Odd Hunter. Time will tell if it's. I mean, the fact that we're discussing the future possibilities of Odd Hunter does indicate that it is at least a lighter touch than outright deleting the deck or banning the quest, which I know some people would have been happy with. But I don't know. I don't have the. I know not everybody shares this opinion, but I don't have the same, disdain for a deck like Odd Hunter that I do for Pirate Warrior, just because I feel like it's a more beatable deck. And again, like I reference the matchup spreads quite often today, and like the matchup spreads would tend to agree with me that there are a lot more decks that beat Odd Hunter than there are Pirate Warrior right now. So
yeah, the nerfs, I kind of gave some thoughts on Twitter, like Roffle kind of mentioned that. I had some suggestions for the Apprentice nerf, which I would have preferred, which was to make the battle cry make your spells cost 1 less this turn. I think that kind of solved a lot of the problems, but I kind of get them just kind of wanting to delete the card and that sort of 2 mana interaction, so it makes sense. Odd Hunter kind of surprised me. Like, I'm happy they did it, but I think we talked about like last show as well that Odd Hunter is very different than any nerf that they've done before for Wild. I mentioned this again in that thread where I talked about Barnes, Bloom, Aviana, Darkler. Like these are all typically like early game mana cheating things, like early mid game mana cheating, and Odd Hunter doesn't really fit that definition. Like, so it's an interesting nerf for them to go after this type of deck for play pattern reasons. Ignite Mage was far more typical in terms of like the type of thing we expected, and it's kind of why we were all just like, yeah, Apprentice is dying, Apprentice is getting hit. But Odd Hunter I wasn't quite sure about, so it was interesting that they went for this one. I do think that there are a couple of regrets that are probably going to be had when it looks to Wild. Firstly, the Pirate Warrior change probably being too light, but I think Shaman should have really been addressed in these patch notes as a bit of a preemptive measure. But
well, I mean, you were just gonna hop over to my next question here. Were there changes that you were hoping to see that you didn't? I mean, obviously we were hoping to see a stricter hit to the Pirates, but do you want to hop into this Shaman talk? Sorry.
Yeah.
Do you want to hop into these Shaman nerfs that you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, for sure. The reason why I kind of want Shaman changed is right now it's only really bad matchups. They're sort of like Odd Hunter and then Pirate Warrior. People think the Pirate Warrior matchup is favored at higher ranks. That's very typical of people thinking about Pirate Warrior. Regardless, like Odd Hunter and Pirate Warrior, like those are kind of the unfavorables. and now they're nerfed. And the Pirate Warrior nerf is probably a bit more significant, I think, in the Shaman matchup. That's like one of the matchups where like a half-turn Rakara can actually make a bit of a difference because, you know, it gives you that one extra turn to maybe get the Snowfall Guardian down and the Grumbles and all that kind of stuff, which can be a big deal. So I think that Shaman is basically left without counter. Like, I don't know what beats Shaman because board decks don't beat it. Like things like Shadow Priest and like Aggro Druid and Cute Lock, like those decks lose to it, to the Freezing and the Flurgle and the Devolve. Combo decks, like off-board combo stuff, doesn't beat it because of all the disruption and the rats and like all that typical stuff. And it just doesn't really leave a lot other than very specific kind of like burn-based strategies where we saw Odd Hunter was a bit favored of it, but there's not really much out there that kind of works like that in Wild. Even Hunter is probably a little bit favored, like barely, but again, I don't know what's going to be able to beat Shaman. And I also just don't like the Shaman play experience very much in general, which is a personal preference. But I think the whole tech experience and replaying tech and keep playing tech and play every neutral tech is generally just kind of shitty. And I think that they should have probably hit like Flurgle Toxfin, which is a good way to address all the concerns I have about Shaman, but also that specific interaction I think is way too strong. And I think it's way too oppressive to a lot of matchups. And I would have liked to see that changed in some way. Personally, I would have had it so like Flurgle has like the Murloc that you play deals the damage. There is a problem with that where it means that you can never print like a poison Murloc, but that's an example of the type of change that would have had almost no difference to anything in Standard or Wild right now, except for the Flurgle Toxin interaction as it stands. So I think Shaman is going to be a bit of a problem, and I think like Shaman, Mechathune, and Pirate Warrior are going to be kind of like the new kings of the format.
Yeah, and you were mentioning what counters, or posing the question of what counters free Shaman, but I feel like Mechathune Warlock probably has a good chance to fill that gap. It is running rats, which does okay. I feel like the Loatheb chains can become a bit of a problem, but aside from that, it feels like a very, like from my experience at least, it feels like a very winnable matchup in most cases. It's just I don't know, if you're able to cut some of the like tech against those burn decks, you might be able to find a way to deal with the Mechathune type combos, or because like looking at the matchup spread for it, like Alignment Druid is a terrible deck right now, and it does pretty well into free Shaman. So like anything with a relatively quick combo that doesn't necessarily play for board all that much could probably do it, but
they just nerf those decks.
Yeah, so. Yeah, exactly. And like I agree with the with the sentiment that like Shaman does concern me a little bit. It just feels like it has, in any deck that wants to make a board and use its board, it feels like it has just like 5 or 6 I win cards where if it draws them and plays them, it just wins. And
yeah,
like that's not a fun experience. But you just like it was like I said with the evasion Cloak of Shadows for Rogue for like a few turns against free Shaman, you're just like, well, I don't get to play anymore.
Yeah, the thing with like just thinking about like Mechathune as an example, like right now Shaman is very focused on Mage and Odd Hunter, like it's running specifically so much spell tech. But like if you run Boom Pistol Bullies, for example, for the mirror, like that destroys Mechathune. Like being able to loop Boom Pistol Bully a lot of time, all of a sudden the Vol'jin can't go off, they can't play Librarians, they can't play Tour Guides, like there's gonna be a whole bunch of like passing turns. And if you want to go even one step further, like Mutanus, I know like people don't like playing the Murloc cards, but Mutanus does a lot of damage. And also like ratting the Mechathune right now isn't an issue because of Phylactery, but people, particularly people a lot of the time at Legend, they play Devolve, and Devolve kind of like takes away that interaction. So I think like that's a matchup that right now, like on average, is probably Mechathune favored. Like I agree with that right now. Is that going to be the case if even the slightest bit of attention is paid towards Mechathune? Like I'm not 100% sure on that.
No, that's a fair point. I think you're absolutely right. Like it gets, like you said, Shaman gets to shift its focus, and that makes it scary.
Yep. All right. Well, settle in for Shaman Stone 2.0 is what it sounded like, right?
Ooh.
I will say I find it kind of interesting. You've mentioned, Corb, kind of your surprise that they touched Odd Hunter, and it kind of indicates to me this is maybe just like one of the first times that they've nerfed purely based on power level and not just like pure mana cheat, right? Because
I
like
don't
Snip
agree.
Snap
but
Warlock, Dark Glare, all the
Yeah.
most of the changes they made in the past have just been like because of either super degenerate combos or mana cheating early in the game. This is the only one I could think of that was just like pure power level reason.
I don't know if it's power level is necessarily the best descriptor. But I think it's more that it's an acknowledgement that play pattern issues aren't just mana cheating, but this similarly capped games, right? Like that's the whole point of the changes, and it's something that devs addressed in the comments is that they kind of wanted to increase the average game length. They didn't want to put a cap on it, and that's why they hit Ignite and Odd Hunter, these off-board damage decks. And that's the interesting part to me is that, like, I don't think it's just power level, because otherwise I think Pirate Warrior would have been hit a lot harder, right? Like, it would have been addressed as like a wild-specific nerf to Pirate Warrior. But it is interesting that it is a very different nerf, and the fact that this type of deck falls into what they consider unacceptable at this popularity.
Even with that though, it still leaves me confused in terms of like why Odd Hunter's play pattern is not okay, but like Pirate Warrior is okay, because they still like, yeah, the damage is coming from different places, but like they're still essentially doing the same thing, right? They're very efficiently sending damage both at your board and at your face, and speeding up the pace of play in the format. And they're both, I think, equally guilty of that, just because of like all of the cannon shots and weapon swings from Warrior makes it so that like the opponent can't have a board. is really how it plays out. Like Shaman makes it so that you can't use your board. Pirate Warrior makes it so that you can't have a board. And so it's like, and the like Odd Hunter was doing a very similar thing while sending damage at the face, which is what Pirate Warrior does. I don't know.
Yep. I mean, the reason I brought this up was, and it kind of, you guys just proved my point, so I don't even know if I want to keep bringing it up, but it means that there might have been a little bit of a shift in their philosophy of what they're willing to address, which is what I was going to bring up. And that might mean that in the future, I don't know, dude, I'm huffing the hopium that like it might mean that if Pirate Warrior and Shaman now become these premier kind of top tier decks with no real hard ways to counter them, they're going to be willing to step in. I don't know, man. That might just be me hoping too much, but I mean, overall, I think I'm happy with the nerfs because that means change in the Eternal format. And
I mean, we got wild specific nerfs. That's
Yeah.
really rare. Like, it's not often that they do this, and they hit us with a double whammy, especially like some of the ones that people have been demanding for the longest time.
Yeah.
So overall, like, you can be disappointed in some capacity, but on the other hand, you have to look over and be like, yeah, I mean, it's pretty good. They actually did it, even if it was some ways like perhaps overdue.
Yeah, I don't, just because we ended on the Pirate Warrior change, I don't want to like seem like the balance changes are bad. I think that particular one maybe is, from what I can see, not going to be enough, but like the balance changes on the whole are good. It is still slowing down Pirate Warrior, which is, it's something that I think it could stand to take. So yeah, in general, I'm happy that there are balance changes. I'm just, I was hopeful that there would maybe be some more, and maybe that's my expectations being misplaced. But in general, like I'm grateful for some change.
Yeah, I can't be disappointed in the changes when they killed the Sorcerer's Apprentice. So, gotta be happy whenever they made that change. So let's move on to the second part of the episode here. So there's a VS report coming out by the time you guys have listened to this episode, recapping the meta that has been for the past month and a half post Alterac Valley. And so the way that I want to use our discussion here about the VS report is just kind of talk about what the established meta is, look at the balance patch that's coming on Tuesday, and then talk a little bit more about what the future meta might look like based upon what we know about matchup spreads and everything like that. So There will be a couple of images that are up on your screen. If you guys are listening via the podcast, we'll do our best to describe it, but you can find the images via the link down in the VS report, down in the description. All right, so let's start off with our discussion here with the popularity rankings. So basically what this is just talking about how popular all of these archetypes are. So looking at Upper Diamond here in the first image, and then looking at Legend ranking here in the second. So shouldn't be too much of a shocker, right? Where you see a crap ton of Pirate Warrior, crap ton of Odd Hunter, and the third most popular deck, Free Shaman, specifically jumping up a little bit there at higher Legends. So these three decks, not too much of a surprise to me. And then the fourth most popular deck, I think you can combine just the combo Mage archetypes here a little bit. I know they are very distinct decks here in the VS report itself, but Flamewaker and Ignite Mage basically equal populations. But yeah, I mean, none of this was too surprising to me. The Pirate Warrior population a little bit higher in Legend than I was personally expecting, because you just don't see a ton of it, at least on NA Legend ladder. I know, Roffle, you're probably experiencing a ton of Odd Hunters, or Pirate Warriors and Odd Hunters, so you're not too surprised by these.
No, these numbers almost match mine exactly in terms of play rates for particularly Pirate Warrior, but also Odd Hunter. So, yeah. People play good decks, and people play them a lot. And, I don't necessarily see the play rate. So we talked earlier about, like, the other two nerfs. Even if the Pirate Warrior nerf is more impactful than we think it is, I don't think that the play rate will see a decline immediately. In fact, you might get some people that were playing Odd Hunter shifting over to Pirate Warrior as well. So, like, if anything, we could see an uptick in Pirate Warrior after this VS report comes out, indicating how strong the deck is. So we'll find out soon enough whether there's impact in the format. So popularity-wise, I don't think Questline Warrior is going anywhere.
Yeah, the 25% Questline Warrior at Diamond 1 through 4, like 25% is usually like pretty much the upper limits of what you tend to see in Wild. Whatever there's like a default tier 1 sort of premier aggro deck, whether it's Secret Mage or something like that in the past, that's usually the kind of number. So that's kind of what I would have expected. The Questline Warrior at Legend, it's a little bit more than what I see, or like a couple percent, but I mean, it's not too far off. So it's one of those things where it's probably just a little bit more of it at some lower Legend ranks, and kind of drops down to maybe like 13, 15%, that kind of range, a little bit higher up.
Yep. All right. Were there any big shockers to you guys when you look at some of the other archetypes here being represented?
In terms of popularity, not really. I guess like maybe the Mage stuff being as low as it was. It's not like the Mage is super low, but Mage is sort of the opposite of Warrior, where I think it gets a little bit more popular at higher ranks. Specifically, I thought that Ignite Mage at Legend would be a lot more popular, or Ignite Mage as a whole would be a lot more popular. But if you look at like all ranks, Ignite Mage is only like 2% of all ranks. Flamewaker Mage has double the popularity of Ignite Mage, which to me is shocking, because we'll get into the power rankings, but Flamewaker Mage is not a deck that you should be playing if you're maybe a little bit less experienced in the game. So that was a little bit surprising.
That's not very surprising to me, though, right? Flamewaker Mage is like 10 times more fun than Ignite Mage, because Ignite Mage is quite possibly the most boring combo deck when it comes to play patterns. So that's not really a surprise to me, because we have this whole argument of people are going to play what they find fun, even if it's not good.
Yeah, people play both. People like to win,
Yeah.
I think, and
like to win.
a lot of people winning is fun. So I don't know. There's a lot of decks like APM Mage, which even if you think it's fun, there's been a lot of decks like that are only High Legend exclusives that never trickle down. And I thought the Flamewaker Mage would be that type of deck. And I think it has been that type of deck in the past, but I think Directha kind of maybe gave it a little bit more hype recently.
So the one deck that I do want to talk about before we move on, because this will transition really, really nicely into our power rankings. So we moved on to Priest. For the longest time, Priest has been a Reno Priest and Big Priest class in our format. And then for the past 6 months since United in Stormwind, it has been a one archetype class with Shadow Priest, because Reno Priest and Big Priest, they suck against Pirate Warrior and Odd Hunter. But we've seen the increase in popularity of a very specific deck here, with Divine Spirit Inner Fire Priest, kind of making a little bit of a resurgence here the past couple of weeks, and maybe for a very good reason. But it was super surprising to me because I think it's just recently picked up in popularity to see it at almost 2% in Legend. Pretty happy about it, but also very, very surprised.
Yeah, early on in the expansion, I was playing a version of this deck that was horribly unrefined, but like just making use of some of the new cards, and I did well with it despite being a very notoriously clunky Inner Fire gamer. So like, there's certainly something there. I think there's certainly quite a bit of refinement left to be done as well, but like, yeah, it's a deck that's like, it actually does better into Pirate Warrior than you would think, just because it's a lot of stats to devour. And yeah, I agree that it's one to keep an eye on in addition to Shadow Priest, which actually, still underplayed for its power level, but like is slowly kind of starting to trickle down from, it's been increasing at Legend ranks and is starting to increase across all ranks as well, despite the fact that like anything below Legend, Reno Priest and Big Priest are still the popular decks for Priest, despite, like you said, having just horrendous matchups into most of the other meta decks right now. So Shadow Priest and I think Divine Spirit Priest are in particular decks to watch for the class.
All right, so let's get to the thing that everybody's waiting for. Let's talk about these power rankings and our opinions about them. So when you look at these power rankings, we're going to be talking about them specifically in the Legend rank bracket because we believe that this is probably the most accurate representation of their power level. So let's look at Tier 1. Tier 1, it feels like we have 3 top dogs because there feels like there is a pretty drastic jump between the worst of these 3 decks and kind of the next best deck. So let's talk about, and it should be no surprise to you, Questline Warrior, Odd Quest Hunter, and Ignite Mage. Okay, so these are the 3 that we were talking about. These are the 3 decks that got nerfed. And it should be no surprise to you guys that they are the top 3 decks here in Tier 1.
Yeah, interestingly, Questline Hunter, or Warrior, rather, hit the fabled meta peak, according to VS, where it not like it's far and away the strongest and most popular deck, with the best expected matchup spread into the metagame. Giving it the perfect score. So that shouldn't be terribly surprising. Questline Hunter wasn't too far behind it either, hitting a pretty high play rate, and not too a little bit closer in terms of its power level than it was previously. And one thing, I know we're talking about Tier 1 right now, notably absent from Tier 1 that was there in the latest report that we talked about is Even Warlock, and both of them have, in particular the Reno versions, have dropped pretty far down the tier list, and it was a little bit surprising to see.
Yeah, the Even Reno Warlock, decline, basically, like collapse, is probably like the most notable thing if you go from like the previous power rankings to this one, along with the increase of Ignite Mage, right? Like, it's really those 2 decks are the biggest things, I think. Where Ignite Mage, last time we did this report, just to clarify, like it was Warrior, Hunter, and Even Warlocks, and then it was a chasm. There was like nothing else. There was like 1 deck, Shadow Priest in Tier 2, and then everything else was Tier 3. Like, this was a 3.5 deck format, basically, depending on how you want to classify the Even Warlocks. And now, like, Ignite Mage just shot up, and it was basically just on the back of refinement, which is very interesting because it's not all the time that kind of thing happens. And builds got so much better. People like dropped the second copy of Ignite. People dropped the second like Molten Reflection, yada yada yada. Added more tradables, and just got a lot better over time. And now it's like kind of one of the top decks. And meanwhile, even Reno Warlock has just declined completely. Even Warlock though, still kind of holding on there. But yeah, it was kind of interesting. Like, some behind the scenes, when the nerfs were announced and they were told that we were getting wild nerfs, the XR tweet dropped. about Apprentice. And then I was talking to Zach O at the time, and he just said, I think they're going to hit all three of these. Like, I think all the tier 1 decks are going to get gutted here, or at least touch in some way. And yeah, it was interesting that he was right, just because of how dominant they were and, popular and play pattern and all those reasons.
Yeah. I will say, I think a lot of the decline in even Arena Lock maybe doesn't... It's a combination of the rise in Ignite Mage and also the introduction of this brand new deck to our power rankings in Free Shaman, where Free Shaman, I think, very, very good into even Arena Lock because Flurgle Talks, Mutanish, Shutterwalk, your late game in that deck is just so much stronger. I guess that's the right way of saying it. So much stronger than the even Arena Lock late game. And then I think that combined with the fact that, man, I was scared when Defias Cannoneer and Smite came out. Like, it made the Pirate Warrior matchup so much harder for these slower decks because you no longer can say, all right, I'm going to stabilize, and then turn 8, I'm going to play a Willow. Because with Cannoneer and Smite, there's so much more damage, and you don't have the chance to stabilize before you just kind of die, even if you do have the Reno and the Zap and everything like that. So I think those kind of have contributed to the fall of even Arena Lock. I think even Lock is probably still fine because consistently playing turn 3 8/8s is never not going to be terrible. But I'm honestly a little bit surprised that Free Shaman and kind of the slower Cthulhu Druids are kind of down here. But when you think about it and the popularity of Odd Quest Hunter and Ignite Mage, it's not too surprising to find Free Shaman down here. Cthulhu Druid, while it has a good matchup in Odd Hunter, just gets absolutely bodied by Ignite Mage. So it's not surprising, even though I think that they are still very, 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 very good ladder choices if you are in the right meta.
Yeah, just before we go on the even Reno Warlock, I'll just mention that that matchup that you're talking about, the Pirate Warrior matchup and the Cannoneers, it's probably like the most fascinating thing that came out of the report to me, where in the last report there was like 60-40 for the Warlock. Like, even Reno Warlock was a legitimate sort of soft counter to Pirate Warrior. That matchup went from 60-40 to 35-65. Like, it got worse. It got even more worse than just flipping. And that by itself, given like the popularity of Warrior, is actually enough to knock even Arena Warlock down like 4%. Like, if that matchup never flipped, it would be basically like a high tier 2 deck right now. But that's kind of just the damage of Cannoneer and Smite and just how those things kind of flipped. But yeah, on like Free Shaman, very, very well rounded. It just happens to lose the 2 most popular decks. That's kind of a hard thing to beat when you are unfavored. But apart from those 2 specific matchups, it is super well rounded. And with Cthulhu Druid, interestingly, it's tier 2 in our tier list here, but we kind of dig into this in the report. The Linecracker build with Mechathune is actually tier 1. And that might come as a surprise. It's one of the sleepers in the format right now. But yeah, Linecracker Mechathune Warlock, Linecracker Mechathune Druid is legitimately one of the best decks today. And yeah, it's pretty underplayed overall.
Yeah, I noticed that, and like I believe it made sense that it would be maybe a little bit more reliable than the Cthulhu version, just because you're like actually working your way towards a more proactive combo. But like in the metagame, like what does the Mechathune actually add to that deck? I was having a hard time wrapping my head around, like, other than against in the mirror or against Mechathune Warlock, like what does that card beat that you aren't already beating by gaining like 2,500 armor?
I think this thing's like I don't know exactly the specifics on Linecracker. I try to avoid playing that deck a lot of time. So I'm not sure whether it's really needed the Mechathune. I know the Linecracker specifically is just much better a lot of time. Like, it's something that can completely dominate the mirror because, like 30 damage off Cthulhu isn't 2,000. So that's kind of a nice edge. But as for the Mechathune specifically, I'm not sure whether like the Mechathune is really making that much of a difference, or it's more just Linecracker is good. So yeah,
right. I absolutely believe that Linecracker is good, just because like the Cthulhu pieces are useful at times, but they're still kind of like inefficient, and so you just end up with a more efficient deck if you're able to pare those down and run the Linecracker combo instead. You don't yeah, but I think that a couple things that I was surprised about is in a similar vein is, first of all, how bad that even Warlock matchup was against Pirate Warrior. Also, how bad the Cthulhu Druid matchup is. Like, that deck might have some struggles with the loss of Odd Hunter, because like that Odd Hunter matchup was so abysmal for the Odd Hunter that like that was one of the main reasons to play Cthulhu Druid is you just farm the Odd Hunters. You do have I feel like it's a reasonable matchup into Pirate Warrior. That's why I was a little bit surprised to see how is as unfavored. I felt it was at least even, probably leaning Pirate Warrior, but that doesn't seem to be where the what the data suggests. And similarly, like Free Shaman, I was surprised to see that not have a even to favorable matchup into Pirate Warrior. The snow we talked, that was the matchup where the Snowfall Guardian probably hurts the most, but like the deck has more than just a Snowfall Guardian. It felt, I don't know. I think that the fact that like even matchups that feel good are still unfavored is like indicative of what I consider to be the huge problematic aspect of Questline Warriors. It just bullies every other deck. Like even decks that feel like it should be good into it, it can still just scam wins, and that's what it does. It just scams wins. And right now, looking at the matchup spread, it's like it's even into Shadow Priest or close to it. It's unfavored into even Warlock, and it's unfavored into Questline Hunter, which is now going to see like a pretty big drop off. So like, what's beating Pirate Warrior?
Well, first of all, before I hop into the answer of what beats Pirate Warrior, Mechathun and Linecracker is probably for the mirror and probably for Ignite Mage, so that you don't have to sit there for 30 minutes. Whether it's worth running or not, outside of that, I don't know. What beats Pirate Warrior? Mechathun Warlock might be the closest thing that we have to, and I know that's like very iffy, but with Ignite Mage and Odd Hunter going away, I think Mechathun Warlock gets a lot better. And I will say, Mechathun Warlock has a bunch of AoE and a bunch of healing. I don't know.
You guys are skipping the best counter.
Okay, Divine Spirit, Inner Fire Priest. Sure. Go.
Yes, like we can't just like waffle past this one. Divine Spirit.
Well,
Inner Fire
we were on the
Priest is
Mechathun
best
train.
counter.
We were talking
I know,
about the Mechathun
but here's the thing. I'm not sure actually Mechathun is that good in the Pirate Warrior. I think that's another deck where it's like, oh, that feels fine, but then you actually look at the stats and it's probably like, oh, unfavored. Like, I think that's genuinely how that kind of works. So I disagree on that point, I guess. But I mean, if we're talking about Pirate Warrior counters, we have to talk about Divine Spirit Priest. This minion-based version of Divine Spirit Priest, so not the spell version, nothing running Sethic Veil, just running like Web Lords and Death Lords and Drekthars, I almost said Drek Lords, just running that kind of stuff. Dominates Warrior. Like, it's really, really good. Now, does Priest have its other issues in other matchups? Yeah. But right now, when Warrior is as popular it is, and Priest absolutely shreds that matchup. I'm talking about shreds. Like, it is better than even Warlock with Galactic Crawler into Pirate Warrior. It is the best counter. We're talking about like 75, 80%. You decimate that matchup. So, I mean, that's the answer. It's a big part of why, like, Inner Fire Priest is tier 1 at all ranks right now. So, yeah, very impressive deck that people, aren't really playing that much.
I mean, to be fair, it beats up on Pirate Warrior, but I feel like it loses to everything else, right? Like Shaman, Flurgle Talks, and everything like that. It's... I mean, to be fair, if Pirate Warrior popularity is like 30-40%, it's probably reason enough to play Inner Fire Priest. Okay.
It doesn't even have to be that high, right? Like being that dominant into a 20% matchup is just killer. Mm-hmm. Like, absolutely insane. We've seen kind of the opposite trend before where, people thought like 8PM Mage was tier 0, but it's like 20% into Secret Mage. Like, it's literally impossible for the deck to be tier 1. It's kind of like an opposite of that, where like if you are that dominant into the most popular deck, you're probably going to be borderline tier 1. That's where it is right now. And it'll continue probably to be that way if Pirate Warrior is still highly, highly popular. But yes, it is terrible into many other matchups.
But like, at the same time, Inner Fire Priest is never going to be one of those decks that has like, heavily unfavored matchups just because it can scam games like based on its own
You ever played against a
right?
Shaman with the stack Roffle? You ever played against
I
Devolve
have
and
not
Snowfall?
yet. Okay.
And Toxin?
Devolve, Snowfall, Flurgle Talks, like it is not fun.
Okay. But like how like not every class is Shaman, right? So
It
like it
might
can
be.
still
It might be
it
post
can-
patch.
it can still just do its own like scamming just like Pirate Warrior can. So I don't I think I think you're sleeping on the high rolls that are possible with Inner Fire and always have been. So
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like it's losing some really unfavorable matchups as well, right? When it comes to stuff like Ignite Mage. So yeah, I mean, I think Inner Fire Priest is definitely here to stay, especially if Pirate Warrior's here to stay. I think if we're just looking at like these, I guess we have the 3 top dogs, and then we have these like 2 low sample potential tier 1 decks. I don't know. I'm kind of hyped for Mechathune Warlock because
I think it'll be good. Yeah.
Plague of Flames aside, I think that you take. I think it has. We don't have the stats for this, right? This is why it's in this low sample estimate tier list here. But I do think that it has a pretty good Pirate Warrior matchup. Okay, this is my own small sample size bias, but I do think that matchup is fine. And then I do think against Shaman, they have to hit Rat Devolve or they have to hit Mutanus. This might change, like you mentioned when we were talking about this earlier, if they start teching in double boom pistols and all that stuff. This matchup might totally swing. But I do think that matchup is just like, I think it's slightly unfavored because they can do the Rat Devolve. They can Mutanus you, they can Lothar block you out of games, but you are pretty consistently killing turn 10, I want to say turn 10, right? You're pretty consistently killing on turn 10 with that deck. And it's losing its 2 worst matchups when it comes to Ignite Mage and Odd Hunter. So, like, I do think Mechathune Warlock has a lot of potential. And if we're just looking at post-patch predictions here, I'm going to put my 3 out here, and like you guys feel free to add on to it or call me dumb. But I think my top 3 decks are going to be Pirate Warrior, obviously. I think Free Shaman is going to be kind of the best deck that's not Free Shaman. And I think Mechathune Warlock is going to be that deck that everybody continues to sleep on because Rod has been hit 3 times. And, like, nobody wants to play the deck, but I think that the Mechathune Warlock will be a very, very powerful deck. And to me, that makes up my top 3, with Inner Fire being that, okay, I'm going to pick on all the Pirate Warriors and just hope I don't queue in any Shamans. And if I hit into Pirate Warriors, that'll be a tier 1 deck. And if I hit the Shamans, it's a tier 5 deck. So, to me, that's kind of where I'm picturing the meta right now without obviously having played anything.
yeah, I could very well see Mechathune Warlock taking a similar role that Ignite Mage had in the previous metagame. Like it's already been refined. Like we know about what the best 30, 28 cards is for the deck, so it doesn't have the growing pains that Ignite Mage had that Corb mentioned, where like it shoots up as a result of refinement. It's just like it's there. It just kind of needed the opening in the metagame, and that might be now, depending on how its Pirate Warrior matchup is, and if Free Shaman builds adjust. I don't have the same data that you guys have on the Inner Fire, but like I could very well, I believe that it's good into Pirate Warrior, so I could very well see a deck just like relying on that as its way to win. Weblords do present a problem for Free Shaman as well. So like I don't know that matchup is hopeless. You could always eventually shift towards like a wave potion build too, to like beat up on even locks if those start coming out of hiding with the drop in Odd Hunter and Ignite Mages. And as long as Free Shaman doesn't get too popular, there could be a bit of a resurgence of even Warlock, just to answer some of those Pirate Warriors, in addition to the Inner Fire Priest. And I think, like I said earlier, I think Shadow Priest is probably underplayed as it stands right now too. So like it's flip a coin into Pirate Warrior and you're pretty good into other decks as well. So like why not?
I don't think that matchup in a Pirate Warrior is a coin flip, but yeah. That's just me.
Meowth, I really hope you're not dumb about your top 3 decks because they're the same top 3 decks that I would have.
Okay, good.
You know, Free Shaman, Pirate Warrior, Mechathune. I think those are kind of the top dogs heading into the patch. I think Shaman is probably the most concerning to kind of run away with no bad matchups and that kind of thing. But I think all 3 of those decks are probably going to be very, very good. I think Druid, Druid would probably be solid, but like Roffle said, without Hunter being as popular, it's kind of an issue, right? Like that was his biggest edge for any Druid deck right now, was just bullying the absolute crap out of Hunter and just picking up like freebie wins constantly. And without that in the meta as much, it becomes a much bigger issue, especially when it isn't really good into Shaman. I know it's probably terrible into Mechathune Warlock, unless you're playing some weird solar naturalized wombo combo, and it's probably not going to be good in the Warrior really either. Not that good. So I think it's probably not going to be great, despite the Ignite nerf helping a ton for Druid decks. So yeah, mostly those 3 are kind of what I'm expecting, but maybe we will see things open up in some unexpected ways, because we are just taking out one big swath of the meta game, right? These early burn off-board damage decks with Ignite and Odd Hunter, and maybe some stuff that we're not thinking about can definitely open up. But I think the persistence of Pirate Warrior is probably gonna stop things from getting too crazy, because I think if Pirate Warrior was hit a little bit harder, things like Even Hunter would have a much, much higher chance of still being a thing. But if you're going 2080 into Pirate Warrior, you aren't going to be a thing.
Yeah. Well, I want to take this and make it a legitimate conversation here. We've been talking about the biggest winners. What about the biggest losers from this patch, right? You were talking about Even Hunter. Even Hunter bullied the crap out of these Ignite mages and combo mages that are now not going to exist anymore. Druids are now going to not have the Hunter matchup to pick on. Are those kind of the 2 biggest losers that you see, or there's something else?
Yeah, the one that I saw when going through the report, I know it's not probably the most common deck, so it doesn't come to mind. It's Aggro Tax Paladin. I think it's an insane loser because it it was a really good deck into Hunter and Mage. Whoops, it's really bad into Warrior. It doesn't beat Shaman. Everything that kind of got left, it struggles against, and everything that got nerfed, it was good against. And so I think that's a deck that mightn't be too great after the nerfs, apart from the decks themselves. But yeah, anything that bullied Mage is probably a little bit sad, or anything that bullied Hunter. And hey, nothing really bullied Warrior, so don't worry about it.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I came in, to this conversation expecting to say things like Reno decks are the real big winners, but then again, a few minutes before we went live, I finally got to take a peek at the data. I'm just like, oh no, they're not good into Pirate Warrior. So they're still not going to be good into Pirate Warrior necessarily, and that's unfortunate. So I was hopeful that would be the case, but then I got a closer look, and that ended up. No.
I remember thinking ages ago when doing THL, I kept bringing Big Priest because I was so sure that Big Priest counted Warrior, and then the stats came out and it was like Big Priest gets dumped by Warrior, and I was like, oh, that was such a mistake.
Hey, you didn't get punished for it. You kept winning, so
the high roll.
Yeah, true.
just
high
be
roll.
lucky.
All right, so I hope you guys have enjoyed our discussion about the nerfs and the current meta and the future meta. Let us know down in the comments whether you guys agree or disagree with our predictions and our reactions to the nerfs. I know I asked on YouTube and on Twitter for all of y'all's reactions, and just like the reactions here, they were a little bit mixed, specifically about Sorcerer Apprentice, because a lot of people were not happy to see decks that they really, really enjoyed go. But I think it had to, right, with everything that was going on. I also think, I don't know, I'm going to bring back out that tinfoil hat. Do you think that they made this Sorcerer Apprentice because of the Ignite cheating? Was that a huge factor, do you think, that went into this?
I honestly, I think it was at least partially a factor, but at the same time, I think that it feels like a nerf that has been overdue for a period of time. It's It's much easier to, just like they did with Snip Snap, it's much easier to address it from like a balance perspective than it is to um, deal with people who are actively cheating. So it's kind of a two birds one stone type thing. It's possible they would have nerfed it regardless, but I think that like that maybe was a motivating factor as well.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a like circular thing where it's like, why were players cheating? Because they were playing infinite amount of cards. They're playing infinite amount of they're playing infinite amount of cards. We should probably nerf that. Like it's sort of on itself. But I do think it was probably like a bonus point, right? Like cheating isn't good. People were just throwing left and right accusations. Some of them accurate, most of them not accurate. And it was sort of the bonus point for something that they probably were looking at changing for some time. And this was just like one slight little nudge to make it actually happen.
Fair enough. And I will say, community is just as divided about the Odd Hunter nerf actually just straight up killing the deck or keeping it as still playable. And then everybody, I think, is in agreement with they're not happy with the Pirate Warrior change and and hoping for more. So I think the community sentiment echoing a lot of what we've talked about here on the podcast. And so I don't know. I know we've had some downer moments here on the pod where we're not so sure about what the future is going to hold for the wild meta, but I will say I'm happy for change. I'm always happy for change, even if it's not the changes that I want or it's not, a predicted meta that I'm super going to enjoy.
Yeah, just before you shift off of that, I do want to say that, like, yes, I'm disappointed again on that Pirate Warrior nerf, but I think the meta game will still end up in a better spot than it was prior to the balance changes, and I'm hopeful for that result. So, I mean, silver lining, I guess. You can't get everything you want, right?
Yeah. Well, I was supposed to say, maybe mini sets coming out in about a month, right? If things stay according to schedule. Things may or may not. We normally have the expansion come out like the first week of April, so early mid-February is about when we would see a mini set. So, I mean, we have no news about this. Who knows? It probably won't be coming out because we have this huge patch coming out next week, so it probably won't be coming out until later February. So I don't know, the whole mercenaries thing threw the whole schedule out of whack, and I don't know what to expect when anymore. But that being said, I'm excited for the new patch, and I'm sure that they will step in and make changes if it ends up being even more of a problem than it currently is. But I don't know if that's possible. We'll see. Looking forward to it. Just like I look forward to recording this podcast every week with these two guys because they're awesome. Corbin and Roffle, thank you so much for joining me, and let the people know where they can find your content.
Yeah, you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at RoffleHS and Twitch and YouTube at Roffle.
And you can find me morning Sorcerer's Apprentice at Corbettgames on Twitch and Twitter.
Okay. You guys can find me at GetMeOut, Twitch, Twitter, YouTube. Thank you again for all of you guys that listen all the way to the end. Appreciate the support. We hope you guys are looking forward to the patch. Hope you guys enjoy the new patch. And we will report back next week.